I'm Josh Gates, and this is Expedition Unknown. My search for Alexander's last resting place begins here in the hills of Vergina. In 1977, a Greek archaeologist undertook an excavation of this unremarkable hill just outside the ancient Macedonian capital. What he found underneath it turned out to be one of the most shocking archaeological discoveries of all time. Under tons of earth was the massive entrance to a royal tomb, adorned with the distinctive red and blue colors of Macedon. Incredible. This imposing facade leads to the tomb of Philip II, the Macedonian king who conquered most of classical Greece before his son, Alexander the Great, conquered most of the known world. But Philip's burial is unique because unlike many ancient tombs which were looted, beyond those doors, this one was found completely intact. Let your eyes adjust to the light, and you'll make out treasures beyond compare. Iron armor, silver drinking vessels, ivory shields, and solid gold artifacts that are among the finest ever discovered from the ancient world. Philip was, after all, a force to be reckoned with, a one-eyed, battle-hardened king. He taught Alexander how to hunt, fight, and lead. But in 336 BC, when Alexander was only 20, Philip was assassinated by a traitorous member of his royal guard. Philip's cremated remains were interred in this golden box, marked with the Macedonian 16-pointed symbol called the Vergina sun. Yet all of this pales in comparison to the riches that would have been interred with Alexander. In this same hillside, archaeologists found the tomb of Alexander's son, as well as two looted tombs that may have belonged to Alexander's wife and brother. So, it makes all the sense in the world that Alexander would be buried here too, alongside his family. And yet, he's not here. Never was. But that doesn't mean his tomb was always lost. Ancient historians describe the Soma of Alexander, an immense mausoleum befitting a god-king. It would have been dripping with gold and filled with treasures like this. But they describe it as being 750 miles from here, in one of the crown jewels of Alexander's empire, Egypt. You might want to hang on to something, because just outside the modern capital of Cairo lies the royal burial ground of the ancient capital of Memphis. It is a sprawling and rather unpaved city of the dead known as Saqqara. For centuries, this was where pharaohs transitioned to the afterlife. Beneath the sands, untold thousands of burials, and above, soaring monuments, including the first pyramid in Egypt. But I'm here looking for evidence of another king. Alexander's conquests left him with many titles. He was the leader of Macedon, the conqueror of Babylon, the lord of Asia, and even a pharaoh of Egypt. So could his body be here with Egypt's other divine rulers? Let's find out. After inhaling half the Sahara Desert, I pull over to meet Professor of Classics at Bard College, James Romm. James, hey, how are you?
Hey, Josh.
Nice to meet you. He's the author of the groundbreaking book, Ghost on the Throne, which delves into the long shadow cast by one of history's greatest figures. Okay, Alexander the Great. Everybody knows the name, but I think very few people probably know about the scale of what he accomplished. So let's start with Alexander's world. He comes from Macedonia, Macedon, right?
Correct.
Philip II, Alexander's father, comes along. So what does he do? How does Macedon become this big, powerful thing?
It was all about his reform of the army. Philip built a standing army in service year-round and gave them a brand new set of weapons that he had personally designed. His major innovation was a spear called the sarissa, which was more than twice as long as the spears that the Greeks were using, perhaps as long as 20 feet.
This new weapon was a game changer when it came to the military formation known as a phalanx, where troops would mass together to attack and defend as a single entity. Philip's well-trained forces also employed state-of-the-art catapults, battering rams, and siege towers to knock down walls that were once impenetrable. So this is just a huge burst of military innovation, and he has big plans.
Yes. He decided to take his army into Asia Minor and begin eating away at the Persian Empire, which was the great empire that dominated all of Asia up to that point.
The Persian Empire was the largest, fiercest power of the ancient world, but Philip never got the chance to confront them. With Philip gone, his heir takes the throne, Alexander.
Alexander at 20 years old.
At 20, he takes the throne.
Yes, he inherited his father's army and his father's plans, and he put them into effect with astonishing success and efficiency.
And how would you describe his reign?
The most successful military campaign in world history.
Simple as that. Okay, kids, it's conquest map time. In 335 BC, Alexander and his army whip out their very long spears. Hey there! To invade what's now the Balkans before popping over to Asia with 100 ships.
Row lively now!
The Persians don't take this seriously, which kind of sucks for them. Since the Egyptians weren't too thrilled with being under Persian rule, they basically hand Alexander the keys.
Here you go!
Making him the first foreign-born pharaoh. Even though he's on a roll, Alexander takes a weird detour to Egypt's western desert to meet with an oracle in Siwa who tells him that he is the son of the Egyptian god Amun, so I guess worth the trip.
It's good to be the king.
Now officially a living god on Earth, Alexander decides to go big or go home, taking on the heart of the Persian Empire and their very badass leader Darius in modern-day Iraq. Alexander takes the capital of Persepolis, which burns to the ground.
Whoopsie!
Darius offers a peace accord. Alexander's like, yeah, I don't think so, and chases him into modern-day Iran, where Darius gets killed in a coup, and Alexander is left to seize fabulously wealthy Babylon. In what can only be described as not knowing when to quit, he then leads charges into modern-day Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, most of the stands really, all the way to the Himalayas of Pakistan. All told, he takes 2 million square miles and founds 70 cities, more than a dozen of which bear his name. But his conquering of the whole world is not meant to be.
No. In what the Greeks called India, what is today Pakistan, he was punctured through the lung with a 6-foot arrow, very nearly killed him. He turned around, and after making his way back to Babylon and staying there only a few months, he dies mysteriously at the age of 32.
It must send a shockwave through the ancient world.
It was probably the most devastating piece of news that the world had seen up to that point.
His cause of death remains unknown. It may have been complications from his wound, or was he poisoned? Or could it have been malaria or typhoid? No matter the cause, there's no clear plan for his succession. Okay, but what about his body? After he dies, what happens to him?
So his body's mummified.
And the decision about where to send him falls to who?
To Perdiccas, one of the top generals and the one who was mostly commanding the empire at this point.
Perdiccas decides to do what seems logical, to clad Alexander in gold, put him in a sarcophagus, and send the body back to his lavish family tomb in Macedon. And so a huge funeral procession with a tomb on wheels sets off on the long journey. But as the body passes through Damascus, it's intercepted by another of Alexander's top generals. Meet Ptolemy. Ptolemy has staked a claim over Egypt and named himself as pharaoh, and he figures that having Alexander's body will help legitimize himself to the Egyptians. And where does Ptolemy bring him?
Right here, to Egypt, the royal burial ground of Memphis.
This brings us to the mystery of Alexander the Great. His body and his tomb are missing.
Crazy though it seems, we don't know where it is.
What would it mean to find Alexander the Great?
It would be one of the most staggering discoveries in the history of archaeology. He probably changed the world more than any other single individual.
This is one of the most famous people in history, and we don't know where he is. We don't know where his tomb is.
That's true, but there may be some clues. He might have been right under your feet, Josh.
Literally?
Yes.
Right here. We are in the royal necropolis of Memphis, so I need you to be really specific here, James. Exactly where is Alexander's body?
He could have been right under our feet.
Like literally under our feet?
We're standing on the remains of a temple that was built at the time of Alexander's death.
I'm seeking the greatest lost tomb in history, that of Alexander the Great, who ruled over the known world by the age of 32. I've traveled to the deserts of Egypt. It was here that one of Alexander's successors, Ptolemy, was said to have taken the conqueror's body.
And do we have any indication that he might actually have been put in this temple?
There may be some clues. Come on, I'll show you.
Sure.
Historian James Romm leads me a few hundred feet away to a sheltered ruin.
Wow.
Yes, Josh, welcome to what's known as the Philosopher's Circle.
This is incredible. These do not look like Egyptian statues.
No, these are definitely Greek.
In the mid-19th century, Egyptologist Auguste Mariette uncovered this collection of decidedly Hellenistic or Greek statues, thought to include depictions of Plato, Alexander's tutor Aristotle, and Alexander's idol Homer.
What are a bunch of Greek statues doing in the middle of an Egyptian burial ground?
That's a very good question. They're very intriguing. They seem to be from the time of Ptolemy I, the man who hijacked Alexander's body. And what's more, right next to this semicircle, where we were just standing, was found a temple associated with Nectanebo, the pharaoh from just before Alexander's time.
Nectanebo was driven out of Egypt by the Persians, never to return. He left behind an empty, unfinished funerary temple. So when Ptolemy brought Alexander's body to Egypt, some have theorized that this would have been a very logical place to put it.
So here we have this very Greek shrine right next to a perfectly good abandoned temple. Not a bad place to put the body of Alexander the Great if you're Ptolemy.
Perhaps, but whether he was here or not, he didn't stay here for long.
We don't need to get the shovels. He's not here today.
Definitely not. He was only here temporarily, while a grand mausoleum befitting a person of heroic stature could be built for him elsewhere.
I'm guessing this was not a subtle tomb?
No, it would have been something spectacular.
And where was this mausoleum?
In the city that Alexander founded and that came to bear his name.
Alexandria.
Alexandria.
Alexander's body moved again, and I'm chasing after it. I thank James and point my compass north, driving 150 miles to where the Nile meets the Mediterranean. Today, what little remains of a once grand city are a handful of ruins. While construction of Alexander's seaside city wasn't completed during his lifetime, Alexandria blossomed into a metropolis after his death. This became the capital of Egypt and home to some of the most legendary buildings in the ancient world. This is Pompey's Pillar, the only column from the ancient city still standing in its original place. Alexandria's skyline also featured the world's first museum and the famed Great Library, the legendary repository of knowledge. And standing guard above it all was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the renowned Lighthouse of Alexandria, which protected the city's harbor. Today, though, the skyline looks quite a bit different. A view from the rooftop of one of the tallest buildings in present-day Alexandria makes it immediately clear how the most famous tomb in history got lost. Look at this place. Alexandria has exploded into the largest city on the Mediterranean, home to more than 5 million people, with centuries of construction towering up to the sky. The Great Library burned and has now been rebuilt. The wondrous lighthouse collapsed into the sea, a stone fort standing in its place. And somewhere underneath all of this modern stuff lies the ancient city's royal quarter, with its palaces, its temples, and its magnificent soma, the tomb of Alexander the Great. The very hard question is, where was it? The answer, surprisingly, may lie underwater. On a research vessel steaming out into Alexandria Harbor, I meet my old friend, archaeologist Mohammed El Said.
Hello.
Hello, Josh.
How are you?
And you?
Good to see you.
Mohammed believes it's possible these waters could be keeping history's greatest secret.
This is a dream of all the archaeologists to find the tomb of Alexander the Great.
Yes. Okay, so once Alexander's body is brought here to Alexandria,
Yeah.
the tomb that's made for him must have been a really impressive building.
Yes, it was a remarkable building. It's a pharaoh's tomb.
Maddeningly, there are no exact descriptions of the tomb itself. One ancient source claims it had a pyramid on the roof of a grand structure filled with Alexander's priceless treasures. We do know it was a major pilgrimage site. It was even visited by Julius Caesar and by the Emperor Augustus, who famously paid his respects with a gold laurel.
And where would it have been here?
It would have been in the royal court.
The royal quarter of Alexandria extended from some point along the harbor into the center of the city. It was home to palaces and tombs, including the artifact-filled Soma of Alexander.
The royal quarter would have been somewhere in here. So why are we on a boat?
Not all of the royal quarter is on land, because part of Alexandria is underneath us,
Under the water.
under the water, yeah.
Why is it underwater?
Earthquakes and tsunamis.
For all its glory, ancient Alexandria couldn't stop nature. In the year 365, over 6 centuries after Alexander's death, a powerful quake unleashes a tsunami that devastates the capital and leaves thousands dead. When it draws back, part of the city collapses into the sea.
So is Alexander's tomb underwater in the harbor?
It could be right underneath us. Many things have been found here. Do you want to find it?
Please.
We know the edge of the city collapsed into the sea, but did the royal quarter fall in and take the tomb with it? To find out, Muhammad is taking me on a search for monuments, statues, and other royal architecture beneath the surface. Time to suit up and dive.